Forbes Books presents The Great Digital Transformation with Gerard Zatvani, highlighting the pioneers that reimagined possibilities and reimagined businesses. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and Gerry and I welcome Rodney Zemmel to the podcast. Rodney is a senior partner at McKinsey Digital and the co-author of the new book, REWIRED, the McKinsey Guide to Outcompeting in the Age of Digital and AI. With his extensive expertise in digital transformation, Rodney's here to talk about the exciting possibilities and challenges that we face today. Throughout his career, Rodney has been at the forefront of driving digital innovation, and as the global leader at McKinsey Digital, he's assisted clients across the globe by harnessing the power of data and analytics, digital culture, and capabilities. Rodney, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
So, Rodney, we've got to start with the book because we want to be respectful because I know you're doing the tour promoting REWIRED. So it's called REWIRED, the McKinsey Guide to Outcompeting in the Age of Digital and AI. Talk about the importance of publishing it right now.
We could not have picked a better moment. I'm spending all day, every day talking about generative AI. And I wish I could tell you we planned that, but it's all luck. And generative AI is a fantastic accelerator for this conversation because on the one hand, it lets companies do better, faster, and at less cost, a whole set of things that AI used to do before. But on the other hand, it risks actually sending companies in the wrong direction because it can just create massive proliferation of pilots. And it can be like back to 2018 in digital, where people will feel like they've got more pilots than an aircraft carrier. And the book is supposed to be the guide to help companies and organizations work through that.
Nice. And Rodney, so as you can tell, Gerry's the genius here. I am not. So we've been talking about generative AI for a while. And every time I talk about it, Gerry's like, this has been around forever. This is just all you newbies jumping onto the scene. But Gerry, talk to me about like the current state of AI for you, because like you always tease me, this is not new for you folks in the tech industry. But what do you think about the state of it now and how it works into what Rodney's doing with McKinsey?
Well, basically, AI has been on a hype curve since quite a number of years. So this is not really that much of a news for us. But what's happening with ChatGPT especially, and the number of users they were able to add onto the platform really fast, it's really impressive. And it's kind of AI is getting into, I would say, into a place where we can actually use it. Maybe without guardrails sometimes, maybe in directions there we shouldn't be using it. But we can actually use it. We can actually have some ways of showing how AI can improve and enable and augment what we are doing on our day-to-day. So I think this is positive. But you need to treat this very carefully because in some areas it can become a big issue in terms of privacy and data concerns and all that. So we are very, very positive about this and also in the same time very cautious about this and really talking a lot about supervising what the AI can be doing and really being there to really guide our customers and guide our employees in how they approach AI. So that's where we are today. And I'm very curious to hear how is Rodney approaching this, especially when you guys are interacting with your customers. What is your guideline? What is your direction that you are giving to your customers from this point of view?
So first of all, I'm with Gerry. It's not new, right? And specifically, I think 2017, when Google put the transformer model out, right? For people in the field, that was the moment in generative AI. But it's really been since, the beginning of this year, right? Where it's been like in the public imagination. The reality, though, is this is a technology that is easy to pilot and hard to get value from at enterprise scale. So what we're telling our clients and what our colleagues are working with our clients with every day is you got to start from where the value is, right? There's huge temptation to say, fire it up where you can do something cool and neat. I was talking to a company last week who are trying this in 75 different places. That's crazy, right? You're just going to get yourself tied up in knots. And what you actually need to do is start from where the value is, build a top-down business-led roadmap of where you want to go with it. And then that's what you rewire the organization around.
Gerry, he's speaking your language from top down.
The guidelines that we are providing our people and our customers are really top down, but we see use casing coming up bottom up. I think this has kind of really enable people to dream a little bit and made them come up with some use cases that I wouldn't be able to forecast or even imagine a year ago. And that has value in itself. And when these ROI guidelines plus data security guidelines match with the use cases that we are seeing bubbling up, it's very interesting. It's very interesting, and we see use cases in coming up in surprising areas that I wouldn't have thought about. We allow this kind of a bottom up, top down in our way of doing things. While the top down has value because you need, especially from a point of view of data security, especially from a point of view of how you supervise AI, because supervising AI to really control for bias and understanding how the bias comes in. This is very important to do, and this you need to be top down on this. But on use cases, I think allowing for a healthy bottom up is not such a bad idea if you understand what are the ROI parameters.
I can, in a moment, talk through, I think, the 4 categories of areas where we're seeing Gen AI use cases in particular. But on the how do you rewire the corporation or the organization, right? To Gerry's point, it is a combination of top down and bottom up. And we think that recipe has 6 pieces to it, right? It starts with the business-led technology roadmap. Then it's about talent. Then it's about the operating model, right, which usually involves agile, and we can talk more about that. Then it's about technology and tooling, right? Of course, technology is in there, but there's a reason why we have it as number 4, not number 1. Then it's about data. And then it's about your approach to adopt and scale and really make sure you're driving it well across the enterprise.
You have a pretty detailed framework on how to go about it. I think what I'm interested mostly about philosophically, how do you see this interaction between what AI is bringing to the table and what we can see happening with the entire gig economy, like all this on-demand workforce. And if you are connecting this on-demand workforce with this remote workforce, with the remote home offices, which is completely a new trend since the pandemic, these are going to transform in a way the way we work, the way we address work, and I think especially also in our field, as we are delivering professional services in our field, and I guess in many areas where you have accountants and you have copywriters and you have all of these kinds of areas, industries where these 3 trends will come in and will have a huge impact in their industries, and it will strongly change the way people work in these areas. Do you have a view on this? Like what do you see in terms of trends? What do you see in terms of directions?
Yeah, we could do a whole, other podcast just on this topic of remote work. I mean, we definitely see it as a trend that is here to stay, and there's clear differences by geography and by industry. But we're not going to go back to everybody 5 days a week in the office across all industries the way we were before. I think where it relates to what companies need to do to get value from digital and AI, at the core of that operating model, that 3rd chapter that I mentioned, you've got to get teams working in real agile pods. And I wish we had a different word than agile because it's become a complete business cliche. Like, the Agile Manifesto is probably old enough to have graduated from college by now. But when we looked at our research and we saw who are the companies in the top 25% who are actually making, having positive P&L impact from digital rather than just, talking about it, all of them were doing some form of an agile pods operating model. And not just in technology. The key part is technology and business working together. But actually, to get into that top quartile, it needed to be technology, business, and the control functions. So whether that's legal, finance, HR, whatever the control function is relevant to your industry, those have to work together. You can certainly make those pods work in a remote environment, and many companies are. But it's that empowered agile team that we think is the core of the model.
And I'd like to get your take, too, as a global leader of McKinsey Digital. We talked about some of the challenges now, the way things are going with, you're saying remote's here to stay. But what are some of the most common challenges you're seeing with companies you're working with undergoing digital transformations? Because that's Gerry's bag, digital transformations. When it comes to making that shift, transforming a company, transformation, another one of those tired words, sort of like pivot and agile. But what are you seeing on the ground these days with your work with McKinsey?
Sure. So what our data says is 90% of companies, actually 89% of companies, have got something called a digital transformation. I actually think I've almost never met a company who doesn't have something called that, but maybe they're the ones who wouldn't talk to me anyway. But if you then say which of them are actually showing real economic contribution from it, right? So where can you see it in the income statement, right? Not just in the, in the plans they talk about. The number there is about 25 to 30%. So 25% are showing real positive impact in cost, 30% in revenue in terms of are they on the target, hitting the targets they set out to achieve. There's a whole set of things that drive like who's successful and who isn't. And that's really the thesis of the book. One super simple one, it is this idea of aligning the top team around where you're actually going to drive value. How is the company going to turn this into a source of competitive advantage and not just a bunch of projects? A common failure mode is a CEO or even worse, a chair says, we're going to go digital. And then you get digital sort of cascaded into every business, every function in small ways that don't scale. If you're not targeting 20% improvement in EBITDA or more, then it's not really a transformation. And companies that don't aim high are not going to succeed high.
There is even an interesting observation. Like many people call digital transformation projects or initiatives that I would just simply call digitization. It's simply moving paper-based processes or whatever into the digital realm. And they are not really that transformative because it's not really transforming any kind of business processes. So from all of these companies that are talking about digital transformation, I think that just some of them that are really transforming things, that are really looking into new ways of running business processes that are really transformative to their business, they really have an impact to their bottom line at the end of the day. And I think this is the trick. And how do you bring in AI to a project so that it can have a real impact on the bottom line?
Yeah, and that's why, that's well said, Gerry, but I think it's exactly why we picked the word rewired, right? Because transformation has become a bit of a, everyone's got one. Actually rewiring your organization top to bottom takes work, and that's what it takes to succeed and deliver real impact.
It's a good way of talking about digital transformation, to rewire the company, to reimagine business processes and rethink the way different functions interact with each other. That's really transformative.
And Rodney, do you think the reason these digital transformations are not working is the fact that no one really knows what it means? Like you said, it's a CEO or chair saying, hey, I was at the golf club the other day and some guy was talking about digital transformations and we should do that. Do you think that's just what it is? Again, this top down where no one really knows, or the people that are enacting it don't know what it actually means. And then you get caught up in this. So what are we actually doing here?
Yeah, listen, I think we're past that. Right?
Okay.
I think, that may be true in some cases, but I do think there is something there about clarity of objectives, right? So there's lots of companies who are modernizing their core technology. Maybe they're doing a cloud migration, maybe they're doing an ERP or something, and they're calling that a digital transformation. But really what you're doing is you're doing what the CIO, the CDIO is supposed to do in terms of improving the enabling technology of the company. If you're doing a transformation, you're transforming, you're changing the way business gets done in that company. You're really you're really taking what you did before in a much more data-driven way that's driving revenue, driving cost, driving customer experience in a really measurable way. And thinking about it that way, what's the customer impact and what's the financial impact that drives, rather than just, we're going to do cloud, or we're going to do AI, or we're going to do AR, VR, right? Rather than starting from a technology conversation, that ends up being one of the success factors in Rewired.
All right, so let's get positive here, Rod. What are some of the key traits you're seeing that define a successful digital culture? What are some of the things that stand out outside the obvious of actually being profitable and successful? But are there some traits that you see that sort of like almost like shine a spotlight? Like, oh yeah, that's why they're working, because they're doing X, Y, Z. Yeah,
absolutely. Right. So I mentioned one already on the operating model, right? Having some version of Agile. Another one I'll pick out. So on talent, right? So at the end of the day, talent wins in digital as it does in everything else. And companies who are really having impact have moved away from massively outsourced models onto a more in-sourced approach, at least more, maybe not fully, but at least more heavily in-sourced approach, smaller teams of higher skilled people, and have really taken the opportunity to upskill their workforce, right? So the answer to the question of how many people on the senior executive team really are digitally and AI savvy ends up being a big driver of whether you're going to have positive business impact here or not. It used to be the case. If we're having this conversation 5 years ago, it was all about go to Silicon Valley, go to London, hire the digital natives and so on. The reality is that was a lot better for changing the company dress code than it was for actually driving business impact. So you might need a sprinkling of that, but it's actually how you really reskill and upskill the leadership in the front line of the corporation that makes a huge difference. You
mentioned agile. And actually one indicator for me when I'm going into a company, when they are telling me that they are doing agile, I'll definitely look into it and see what are they calling agile. And if they are doing it according to the best practices, then I know that they are serious, that I know that there are ideas, there are inputs that are being taken from all over the place, and they are driving this process really well. But because sometimes I see companies that they use agile to just describe chaos and things that are not organized, and you don't have a proper ROI established, you don't have a way to measure things, and they are just throwing things to the wall and see what sticks. So when I go in and I see that there is a proper agile process, that you have a proper KPI set up, a proper ROI measured, and the discipline in running the cycles, that's when I see that the company, it's buttoned down and there is some maturity in what they are doing. So that's when you mentioned that word, I think and rewiring is definitely a good word to use in this process.
Yeah, the only but I'll give on your agile comment is we also see companies the other way, right? Who've gone really in love with like the agile ceremonies and the names, and they've got scrum masters and chapters and all of that stuff. But it ends up just being elaborate project management, and they haven't actually got the business, the technologists, and the control functions really working together, right? It doesn't matter what you call it and whether you have the ceremonies or not, if you've really cracked that code. And if you crack that code and then build the right technology infrastructure around it so you can do CI/CD and 2-week release cycles and so on, that's when you're really getting the value.
Some people talk about the agile process as a religion.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's keep things positive and talk a little bit about the book. Can you share some of the success stories of companies you've worked with at McKinsey that you've helped clients achieve successful digital transformations, Rod?
Sure. I mean, there's so many to choose from. I'll give you one example. I'm going to talk about a company that we work with in Baghdad. So that's Baghdad, Arizona, not the other Baghdad. The reason I like this example is because it's about as far from Silicon Valley as you can imagine. I think it's only like a 2-hour flight, but sort of spiritually, it's about as far from Silicon Valley as you can imagine. And this company, it's part of Freeport McMoran, and they're in the copper business. And this particular site in Baghdad has been mining copper and concentrating copper since 1882. And the basic process is, the rocks come out and they are maybe 1%, 0.5% copper. You put them in the concentrator, it comes out 25% at the other end. I'm from New York City now, so what do I know about copper? But that's the basic process. The trouble is, because they've been mining there for more than 100 years, the quality of that ore goes down and down and down. So they thought they were going to have to build another concentrator to get the same output. That's a $200 million capital investment that they were going to need to make. As they were thinking about that, the copper price took a nosedive, and they thought, is it worth making this $200 million capex investment? It just so happened that at that site, the head of the plant and the CIO had been quite farsighted and set up a pretty elaborate data infrastructure. They had sensors on all the trucks. They were tracking and measuring everything. So they said, look, instead of looking at this, building a new copper concentrator, let's instead build a digital twin of the one we've got and let's optimize it. So with our help, they went away and they created this digital twin. And really what it was a simulation of the copper concentrator. There's about 42 different parameters that they end up optimizing. And they just looked at different ways of optimizing those parameters. And what came out, and this wasn't like a go away and sit in a dark room and see what pops out the other side. This was done iteratively over, 2-week, 4-week cycles with the frontline workforce at the plant. What came out was a completely different way of running the concentrator. It led to a 10% improvement in output, which was enough to mean that they didn't need to go and spend this $200 million of CapEx. So 10% improvement in output. And things that had been like really received wisdom for decades on how to run the plant, like, keep the safety stocks at a certain level or only one truck at a time in the queue, things that would have got an operator fired or disciplined for doing something different. Those turned out to be wrong when you actually built the proper machine learning digital twin that was able to optimize it. Based on that, they were then able to pivot the strategy of the company, frankly, largely away from heavy new CapEx investments and into really digitally getting more and more value out of what they had. The reason I like this example is because, again, where it was done and the workforce it was done with and the industry that it was done in, you get a little bit of like, if it can be done in that industry, then gosh, what industry can't also take this on?
Wow, what a great story. And it almost seems like it takes on that sort of ethos that everyone has sort of been crowing about recently, Rodney. It's like, regardless of whatever company you are, you're a tech company. And this is a kind of example of that. And I know Gerry's pushed back a little bit on that, but the idea that even though you're a copper company, you're also a tech company too at the end of the day.
I couldn't disagree more with you, Joe.
I know, Gerry, I know.
Everybody's calling themselves a tech company.
I know.
They are a mining company that are using technology properly. This is what they are. And they are looking at data and they are making decisions based on data, not on feelings and on gut. Because technology enables you to gather data, enables you to look at data in ways that you were not able to do 20 years ago. So the fact that you are using technology in the right way, that doesn't make you a technology company. That makes you a mining
I'm just goading you, Gerry. I knew you were going to get
that. Yeah. But I'll take the bait too. I think, a company that is rewired is a company that is using technology properly and is getting value from technology as a strategic asset the same way it's getting value from its people or whatever other, assets that it might have. Whether it then calls itself a technology company, I think is going to depend on what are the PE multiples of tech companies at the time. But it is amazing how, in industries from real estate to healthcare to others that were fairly slow to move, we're seeing massive potential for this rewiring around technology.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Using technology in the right way can transform your industry for sure. And you need to do that. Definitely, I'm on board with that. But calling yourself a tech company, it's a little bit of a stretch. And yeah, because I really like technology and I'm in this field and we do technology in and out and everything. But I would never call myself a mining company or a shoe manufacturer company because it's just not my field. And them really understanding what they should be doing in the mining field, it's what makes a huge difference for them. And the fact that they put in sensors and they looked at it and they understood the process and what is important in the concentration process, all of these parameters, looking at those, this is they know these things. This is what they will be watching. This is what they will be measuring. This is on the concentrator, they know how much sulfuric acid they should use and all of these things. That's really their job. That's their expertise, their industry, and they should be very strong on that. And they should be savvy about using technology. That at least this is my. When you lose focus and you start calling yourself a tech company, then that's not a good sign from my point of view.
Gerry, I promise I won't do that again to you. And Rodney, you mentioned healthcare. Given your previous experience leading McKinsey's healthcare systems and service practices, talk about the intersection of digital transformation and the healthcare industry. Because we haven't talked about healthcare much on the pod, so I'd love to get your take on that.
So this is actually the reason I got into digital. Healthcare, obviously has incredibly important, that industry has an incredibly important mission in terms of making people's lives better. And it's a slow industry. I mean, healthcare productivity, right? If you look at like FTEs per patient bed day, right, which is one measure of, labor productivity, that has not changed in US healthcare in 20 years. So whereas every other industry has got labor productivity out, healthcare largely hasn't. And now all of a sudden it's beginning to. And the places that are beginning to are the places that are adopting technology well. Now, we've also seen a lot of adopting technology badly, right? People talk about the interoperability problems. People talk about the legacy tech problems, all of those things that have made it slow in healthcare. The reality is, though, and maybe this is back to Gerry's point, I don't want to set him off again on but it's not just about being a technology company. The reality is, legacy mindsets is actually a bigger issue than legacy technology. And the companies that have taken how do we increasingly modernize our tech backbone and keep playing catch up on tech have moved pretty slowly. And instead, the companies or the organizations, because many of these are not for profit, who've said, how do we actually set a roadmap from the top of where we want to go? And how do we rewire around that? And yes, we'll need to modernize our technology, but instead of saying, let's tomorrow move everything to the cloud, instead, we're going to say, where do we actually need AI to make a difference in our business? Therefore, what do we need to move to the cloud to support that? And instead of saying, let's get all the data in the world and put it in a giant data lake, but say, what are the specific data products that we need to create to advance our business and serve our patients better? They're the ones who are in a better spot. And really, it was through having that dialogue and working with some healthcare companies and seeing what a difference it could make, not just for their shareholders and so on, for the ones that were for profit, but really for society and for the mission, which is what got me passionate about technology, which is, what I've been doing for the last, I don't know how many years now.
Gerry, we haven't talked much on the pod, like I said. Have you dabbled working with any healthcare companies with OSF and such?
Yes, we did. And I actually have a pretty different view about healthcare. Like the way healthcare is set up today in our society is not really well done, because it's all about fixing your issue. You have a broken shoulder, let me fix you, and okay, you can measure the productivity on how fast you can fix that and what is the cost per unit and be really effective with that. But how about getting into a model where I can compensate you for you not breaking that shoulder? How about for you having a healthy diet and not getting to be obese? And like this, we are really, as a society, we are still really focused on fixing stuff in terms of healthcare instead of incentivizing people not to get into trouble in the first place. So. And I think even from a point of view of technology and businesses, I see ideas, I see companies that are now more on, let's gather data about you and let's help you stay healthy instead of how do I help you to fix your issues faster. And even like, for example, personalized medicine, like you go now with technology, you can do you can sequence your genome, you can understand what are your issues, your potential stuff that comes from your genetic code, and then personalize your healthcare based on that, and even your lifestyle based on that, and you can have sensors that are tracking all your body signals today, and using that to keep you healthy and keep you well, instead of getting into models where you are fixing stuff. And then that's I think, philosophically speaking, as a society, I think this is where I think that we as a society, we really don't think ambitiously enough about what we can do to actually keep us healthier than in the past.
So, Joe, I'm going to tell you the best healthcare technology story I've heard in the last week or so. So, this was a pilot done in the UK where they essentially created a doctor chat, right, using one of the generative AI technologies, and they got groups of patients, and they asked the patients, can they tell the difference between a panel of real doctors who are interacting through text chat, and can they that versus the chat? It turns out the patients were actually pretty good at being able to tell the difference, right? They got that right more than 60 or 70% of the time. I don't remember the exact number. However, they then asked the patients which ones they preferred. They overwhelmingly preferred the bot versus the real doctors. And not only did they prefer the bot, they thought the bot was more knowledgeable, and they thought the bot was more empathetic. So, my younger brother is a doctor in the UK. So, I find the doctors and the empathetic part easy to believe. I tease him with that. But it just shows the power of these new technologies. And that's obviously To call that a customer service example would be trivializing it. But if you think about how that would be applied to customer service or any sort of customer interaction function across companies, it has enormous potential, right? But thinking through where to start, how to make that work in a robust and scaled way, how to actually build all the right incentives around the organization to use it, how to handle the data in the right way. That's what we're talking about when we talk about Rewired. Again, easy to pilot, but hard to get to work at large scale.
In systems like UK, I think they can work on setting something up where you are going to be incentivized to stay healthy. It's much more integrated, and the data is captured in a much more integrated way than in other countries. And I think that from this point of view, I think UK has a good potential if they are able to kind of not shoot themselves in the foot. Of course, they could be able to do a much better job in keeping the people healthy, really.
And Rodney, wrapping this up here, I want to talk about the current state of technology. And obviously, AI is having its moment. It's become mainstream. We've already made it clear that it's been around for a while, but it's mainstream now. Is there anything else in technology that's even close to having impact on society? Are you seeing anything in your work or that you've spoken to folks or clients that is it just AI all the time now, or is there anything else you're excited about?
So I thought you were going to ask me what the value of your NFT portfolio is these days, right? So,
no.
Yes. So look, clearly there's a hype cycle here, right? And AI is having a moment. We, though, think it is much more than the hype cycle, and that AI, I was going to say a 10-year trend. Gerry would probably say it's a 30 or 40-year trend in AI here. And generative AI is just sort of the latest flourish on that wave. That will continue. That is the one I'm most excited about for right now. If you were to ask me about 10 years from now, the other one I'm most excited about is quantum computing, right? I think if that works, and that's still a giant science experiment, but if that works, it will have really transformational impact. And of course, there's interaction between what AI will be able to do if it has quantum computing on the back end as well. So the two come together.
Rodney, how about this? AI will enable to generate a lot of videos. Many of those will be deep fakes, and many of those will be used to disrupt everything that we know about news and information and whatnot. How do you tell apart a video that is a deep fake from a real one? It's going to be a huge challenge. How do you tell apart, like even today with the amount of spam email that you're receiving, you need a better way to authenticate who is sending the email and who is in a video. And I think that one technology that can address this and is going to come really fast and furious in the next couple of years is the blockchain technology. It is the technology that is the foundation for the entire Bitcoins and all of these things. The blockchain technology is able to authenticate and is able to really track who's done what, and that is going to be an issue because with the amount of deepfakes that we are seeing lately coming out and better and better and better, you won't be able to say who's a real person and who's not very quickly. And that has a huge potential to mess up our society if we don't use something that is able to authenticate much better.
Yeah, and if I maybe take Gerry's point and generalize it a little bit, another thing we talk about in Rewired is this idea of building digital trust, right? There is no doubt that, even before we were having the generative AI conversations we're having now, right, that there's just enormous potential for damaging your customers or your stakeholders' trust. And we've seen that, multiple times in the press. And we think part of the recipe here is companies and organizations really need to think about how are they building trust for all their stakeholders that is not just the minimum regulatory standard. And by the way, the regulations are always going to be evolving and probably lagging. But what do you need to do to really invest in building trust that you're an organization where people will actually want you to have all the data that you have and that will want to interact with you through all the amazing digital ways that you can.
Great. His name is Rodney Zemmel. He's a senior partner at McKinsey Digital and the co-author of the new book, Rewired, the McKinsey Guide to Outcompeting in the Age of Digital and AI. Rodney, thanks so much for the time. Thanks for helping me rile up Gerry. I like to get his blood flowing every once in a while, so thank you for helping me out, Rodney.
You're welcome. This was fun. Thank you.
This has been The Great Digital Transformation with Gerard Zatvani. To participate in the conversation, go to GerardZatvany.com. The Great Digital Transformation is a production of Forbes Books.